Do you want to improve your English without even realizing it? Listening to exciting stories is one of the best ways to learn naturally. While you're enjoying the story, your brain picks up sentence patterns, useful structures, and vocabulary without boring grammar lessons. So make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell so you don't miss a single story. We have new ones every day. It was around 11 at night. The streets were quiet and most windows in the neighborhood were dark. A boy named Kyle was lying in bed, wide awake. No matter how many times he turned or how many deep breaths he took, sleep just wouldn't come. The ceiling looked the same as it always did. The fan above spun slowly. Kyle tried counting backwards, imagining peaceful places, and even drank warm milk earlier. Still, his mind was full of restless thoughts. He looked at the clock. It was getting late. Too late to be awake, but too early to give up. After tossing around for a few more minutes, Kyle sat up and sighed. I need fresh air, he thought. He slipped on his hoodie, grabbed his sneakers quietly, and tiptoed out of his room. His parents were asleep and the house was completely silent. He didn't want to wake anyone up. He opened the front door slowly and stepped outside. The air was cool with a slight breeze brushing against his face. The sky was clear and the moon shone brightly above. It was peaceful, yet something about the night felt different. Kyle started walking down the street. His neighborhood was calm. No cars passed by and the only sound was the wind through the trees. As he walked, he noticed how different everything looked at night. The same streets he walked every day seemed unfamiliar. He reached the small park near his house. Usually it was filled with kids playing and people walking their dogs. But now it was empty. The swings moved slightly, pushed by the wind. The slide shimmered under the moonlight. Kyle sat on a bench and stared up at the sky. Stars filled the darkness like tiny holes in a giant black blanket. For a moment he felt calm. Then something strange happened. Out of the corner of his eye, Kyle saw a shadow move quickly between two trees. He turned his head fast, but nothing was there. He stood up and looked around. Probably just a cat, he thought. But as he started walking again, he heard footsteps behind him. Quick ones. Then silence. He turned around, but again, nothing. The street behind him was empty. He walked a bit faster, suddenly aware of every sound around him. The trees swayed and a trash can lid clanged nearby. His heart began to beat faster. Then he saw it. A figure. Not very tall, not very big, but definitely there. It stood just outside the park, near the fence. Kyle froze. The figure didn't move. Seemed to be watching him. Kyle took a step back. And the figure disappeared. Not walked away. Not ran. It just vanished. Kyle stood still, trying to understand what just happened. He rubbed his eyes and looked again. Nothing. He decided to go home. Maybe he was just tired. Maybe his eyes were playing tricks on him. But as he turned around, he saw something even stranger. His house wasn't where it should be. He looked around, confused. The street looked familiar but different. The houses were older. The trees were taller. There were no cars parked on the side of the road. He ran to where his house should be, but instead of his home, there was a small wooden cottage with a fence. Kyle's heart raced. What is going on? He thought. He turned around and looked at the street sign. It had the same name, but everything else had changed. He walked back toward the park. But the park wasn't there anymore. In its place stood a row of old buildings like from another time. It was like he had stepped into the past. Kyle walked quickly, trying to find something, anything, that made sense. But every corner he turned showed him more of this strange version of his neighborhood. Gas lamps lit the streets. A man walked by carrying a lantern. He didn't seem to notice Kyle at all. Kyle tried talking to him, but the man just kept walking as if Kyle wasn't even there. Then Kyle realized no one could see him. People walked by dressed in old-fashioned clothes and not one of them looked at him. It was like he was invisible. He sat down on the edge of the sidewalk and held his head. "This has to be a dream," he whispered to himself. He closed his eyes and tried to wake up. He counted to 10. Nothing happened. Then he heard music. Soft, distant music. It came from the direction of the park, or what used to be the park. He followed the sound. As he walked closer, he saw a crowd of people gathered around a building with bright lights. It looked like a theater. The sign above it said, "Midnight Show. One night only." Kyle stepped closer. The door was open and people were going inside. He followed them even though he was sure no one would see him. Inside, the room was warm and filled with red seats. A small stage stood at the front. Kyle sat in the back. The lights dimmed. The show began. But it wasn't a normal play. On the stage, a young boy appeared. He looked like Kyle. He wore the same hoodie, the same shoes. He walked across the stage just like Kyle had walked through the streets earlier. The crowd watched silently. Then the boy on stage met a shadow. Just like the one Kyle had seen. The shadow followed the boy, watched him, and then disappeared. Kyle's eyes widened. It was his night. His walk. His story. Scene by scene, everything that had happened so far played out on stage. At the end, the boy stood in front of the audience and said nothing. He just looked around. And then he disappeared. The lights came back on. The people clapped, stood up, and left the theater. Kyle sat frozen. He looked at the empty stage, then at his hands. He felt real. He stood up and walked to the front. Behind the curtains there was nothing. No actors. No props. Just a dark space. He turned around and the theater was gone. He stood in the park again. The real park. The slide, the swings, the bench. Everything was back to normal. Kyle looked around. The sky was still dark. The moon still hung above. He looked at his watch. It was almost midnight. He ran home. This time his house was where it should be. He opened the door quietly and went inside. Everything looked the same. He went to his room, took off his shoes, and lay down on the bed. His heart was still racing, but his eyes were getting heavy. Within minutes he fell asleep. The next morning he woke up wondering if everything had been a dream. But on his desk there was a small ticket. It was old, a little torn, and had these words printed in gold. Midnight Show. One night only. You just experienced how stories can pull you into a world of adventure while teaching you useful English naturally. Without even realizing it, you learned structures like past continuous, conditionals, and passive voice. That's the power of learning through storytelling. Fun, memorable, and effective. If you enjoyed this story, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss an adventure. And don't forget to comment below. What do you think happened that night? Was it a dream or something else? Let us know.